Hey Heights, tonight I want to talk to you about Maundy Thursday. If you've never heard that term before, just to be clear, it's not Monday, Thursday. That's kind of what my kids think that the term is, and they've been asking me for the last 2 weeks, is it Monday, Thursday? Is it coming up on Monday? So it's Maundy Thursday, and that's what tonight represents. And so we get that word Maundy from the Latin word mandatum, which means to command or to mandate something. And so it is on this night that Jesus instituted a new command. And as we're going to find out, it wasn't really a new command at all. It was just a better understanding of the Mosaic law. And so I want to spend a minute with you and just look at John 13. And we'll put the scripture up on the screen for you as we walk through this together as a family. And so John 13:34 says, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." And so again, this is not a new command, but rather Jesus is revealing the way that we love one another, the way that we pursue one another, actually gives a definition, it gives an explanation of the whole entire Mosaic law. And not only that, but the way that we pursue one another is a way by which people can understand who Jesus is. Not just up high, as we've talked about in the book of Hebrews, but also who Jesus is down low. He's not just a God on high that's worth majesty and honor, although he is that. He's also a God that is down low. He's a God that puts on flesh and comes down and suffers for his people. And so this is a picture of Jesus down low. All of tonight, in light of communion, is a picture of Jesus down low. And so if we read John 13:12 through 16, it says this: "When he," that's Jesus, "had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, 'Do you understand what I've done to you?'" This is a good question for us to consider tonight. Do you understand what Jesus has done for you down low? Do you understand what I've done to you? Verse 13, "You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am." Verse 14, "If I then, your Lord and your teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that you also should do just as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who has sent him." And so this washing of the feet here is imagery for what Jesus has come to do. He has come to make the unclean clean. He's come to wash away the filth that humanity has brought into creation and into existence. The clean, if you think about it like this, the very clean, the spotless, the perfect has come down to be made unclean, to be given spots in our place as our substitute. And so if you think for just a moment, this is going to be kind of gross, but if you think for just a moment about the feet of their culture, some of you are already grossed out about feet, as you should be in some ways. But the feet in their culture were terribly dirty. I mean, disgusting, foul feet. They had on sandals. They had dirt roads that they were walking on. There would have literally been cow manure that at that time they would have just kind of walked straight through. There's all sorts of disgusting things on the ground that they would have been walking through. So if you're grossed out about feet before, you're most certainly going to be grossed out about them now. But think about that. You have these disciples that have come into the room. Their feet would have been literally disgusting. Jesus comes up to them. He kind of puts on this apron, if you can picture it with me. He puts on this apron, gets on his knees, very down low, gets down on his knees, kneeling down. He wets a towel in a basin and then begins to wash the disciples' feet. Think about all the disgustingness that would have been all over this towel as he dips it back into this basin and then back to their feet and back into this basin and back into their feet, placing it back and forth again. The water that would have been in that basin would have became disgusting. The white towel that he would have had on, the apron that he would have had on, would have had a mess all over it. Even on the ground there, it would have been absolutely disgusting. And so what Jesus is doing, he's painting this beautiful picture and he's saying, I have come to do what you could never do. I have come to clean you. I am spotless. I am perfect. I'm not just Jesus up high, as we've read about in chapter 1 of Hebrews, but I'm also Jesus down low. I have come to suffer and to do for you what you could never do, what the law could never do, what the sacrificial system could never do. I have come to make you clean. The clean comes to become unclean for us. This is the picture that Jesus is painting. This is what he's kind of pointing to us in the book of Hebrews over the last month as we've been moving towards this moment in time. This is how Jesus makes the purification for sins. And so he says, you call me a teacher and Lord, and you're right. Like we've talked about that for the last couple of weeks, that Jesus is most certainly Lord seated up high, but here again, he's also teacher. He's down below. Similarly to what we have seen throughout the book of Hebrews. He is Jesus on high, Jesus down low. And so he comes down to these disciples, to his brothers, and he's loving on them in this way to paint a picture of the gospel, to reveal to them this is the only way that you can experience salvation, which is why he asked them, do you understand what I have done? And I would ask you again tonight, do you understand what Jesus has done for you? Before you go to the table, before you take communion, can you confidently say, this is the Jesus that I've experienced? Not just read about him in the Bible, not even just maybe prayed lofty prayers to him, but in a very real, tangible way. Do you know this Jesus that comes down to clean you up? This is the Jesus we want to invite you to experience as you're entering into communion tonight as a family or with your missional community. And so he comes down to walk with those who've professed faith in him, to walk with them through the very mess of the world in a very literal way. He's modeling all of this to us. Then after washing his feet, Jesus comes down low, models everything that he models, and he says this in John 13:34. Now he says, as I read earlier, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. Verse 35. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So on one hand, yes, Jesus is instituting a new command. He's saying something very clear, something very direct to his people. But on another hand, he's really just saying, like, this is the summation of the law. Everything that I've given, everything that Moses has given, all of the Old Testament has pointed to this moment. I'm going to love you, and in the way that I've loved you, so also you're called to love others. And in doing so, people will then see me, he's saying. People will see Jesus in the way that we pursue, in the way that we walk with one another, in the way that we love each other as disciples. He says the whole world will know him, not just us and our good works. Those do not save you, but they will in fact know Jesus. And so the Lord's Supper, communion, the meal that we're inviting you into tonight, this meal points to all of this as a reality. Again, Jesus is not just up high, but down low. And so before you take communion together, I want to actually allow communion to institute for you a way by which you can love one another, a way by which you can actually get on your knees next to one another, kind of clean one another's feet, so to speak, step into the mess of one another with one another. And so the first thing I want you to do tonight before you take communion is actually reflect. I want you to reflect on some of the mess of your life that you continue to cling to, just in the same way that dirt and literal manure and grossness of the world clung to the disciples' feet day in and day out, so also you and I, man, we cling to sin. We love it. We bask in it. We want anything but to have him wash us clean. It's so much a part of our identity. I just want you to reflect on that before you take communion. What are some of the sins, some of the things that have given us identity that is trumping the identity that Jesus Christ has bought for us? And then secondly, I want you to confess that sin. I want you to allow the gospel to actually wash over you, to be reminded that only Jesus is perfect and only Jesus' death can atone for that sin, man. And let that just literally wash over you. I would say you can confess the mess. Just let that go. Confess your need and confess the reality that you are similar to Judas, who's sitting here in this crowd, getting his feet washed and will soon go betray him. We're no different than Judas. We will sit and proclaim the gospel on one hand, and on the other hand, we will very quickly turn our back on who Jesus is and what he's done for us. And so then thirdly, I just want you to see Jesus as the better. And so as you actually take the communion elements and you have them in your hand tonight as a family or as a missional community, I want you to recognize those elements. See the bread as Christ's body that was broken for you, not in theory, but down on the ground, literally for you. He came and knelt down and went to the cross for you. And also then see the cup, which represents Christ's blood that was spilled in your place as your substitute. And so three things that I want you to do. First, I want you to reflect on the mess that you cling to. Secondly, I want you to confess that sin, confess that mess openly to your MC, to your family. And then third, literally as you take and eat, man, just try to sit and be present with Jesus as if he's actually in the room with you. Let me read to you 1 Corinthians 11, 23 through 26. It says this. It says, "For I received from the Lord what I also delivered to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night when he was betrayed, he took bread. And when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, 'This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me.' In the same way also he took the cup after supper, saying, 'This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and you drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes.'" And so one more time, as you said in this story, as you sat together as an MC or as a family, I want you to reflect on the sins that have kind of taken you captive, that you cling to. I want you to literally confess those. I mean, confess it out loud to the people that are there with you. And then cling to Jesus. See him as the absolute better in every way. See him as Jesus as Lord that sets up high, as we've seen the last 4 weeks, and also see him as Jesus that is down low, that comes to suffer, that is fully man in your place as your substitute. We love you guys. We hope that you're having a great Holy Week. We'll see you soon.